Okay, let's just jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking Dr. Robert A. Peterson's framework on humanity and sin. We're going straight to the source material to tackle a pretty monumental concept, one that literally shapes the entire foundation of biblical history. So here's the big question. Why on earth would a completely sinless being choose to sin? Think about it. It's kind of the ultimate crime scene investigation of biblical history. And to actually solve it, we've got to rethink pretty much everything we assume about the origins of human rebellion. How does someone with a totally perfect nature deliberately decide to cross a moral boundary? It's a massive puzzle, and figuring it out requires a very specific kind of forensic tool. To guide us through this complex theology, we're going to follow a simple roadmap. We'll look at the grand drama of history, uncover Adam's pre-fall state, use Christ as the ultimate lens, dive into a tale of two representatives, and finally get to the true essence of sin. All right, starting off with part 1, the grand drama of history, a story in 3 parts. This brilliant timeline lays out the biblical story as a sweeping drama in 3 distinct eras. You see, we move from the really happy beginning of creation, right through the catastrophic intrusion of sin, and finally culminate in the spectacular finish of redemption accomplished by Christ. It's a story where God's exclusive image bearers turn their backs on him, which totally sets the whole plot into motion. Now, what's truly fascinating here is God's immediate reaction to that catastrophic intrusion. You'd think he might just wipe the slate clean, right? But instead of destroying his creation when sin first intruded, God immediately begins what Dr. Peterson calls a slow, tedious retrieval project. He gets personally involved to recover the world. Moving on to our next section, uncovering Adam's pre-fall state. Let's look at the original setup. So before the fall, Adam had this incredibly unique ability known in theology as posse non peccare, which basically means he was able not to sin. And this sat right alongside posse peccare, meaning able to sin. The absolutely crucial takeaway here, Adam wasn't morally corrupt or flawed from the get-go, not at all. He possessed this perfectly balanced capacity to either completely obey his creator or to rebel. C.S. Lewis actually captured this perfectly. Adam and Eve didn't start out with corrupt hearts. Instead, they faced this incredibly strong lure of wanting to be entirely self-sufficient. They wanted to be independent nouns running their own little universe, rather than adjectives defining the glory of God. It's such a profound way to look at it. Okay, on to section 3, Christ as the ultimate lens. This is where we use perfection to understand failure. When you look at Jesus in the wilderness, he faced a continual probation. This reveals that every single temptation, whether it was turning stones into bread or, jumping from the pinnacle of the temple, was actually a lure to break a specific covenantal relationship with the Father. The devil wasn't just offering a free meal, he was actively pushing Jesus to exercise his own will against the Father's will. There are 3 absolute key features to this Christological lens. Jesus was fully human, completely sinless, and God incarnate. Because of these unique features, he was qualified to face an even more intense, downright agonizing level of temptation than Adam ever did. And keep in mind, the fate of all humanity was literally on the line. Jesus had the actual freedom to choose, just like Adam did. That brings us to section 4, a tale of two representatives, comparing Adam and Christ. When we put these two side by side, the contrast is just stunning. Both were completely untested and perfectly righteous at the start, but they were tested under completely different circumstances. Adam enjoyed a pristine, perfect world and failed just a single choice. Christ, on the other hand, entered a severely fallen, broken world and succeeded perpetually. The outcomes, exact opposites. And because both of these figures acted as our ultimate representatives, their individual choices legally and morally determine the entire trajectory of humanity. Adam's single wrong choice brought about a total deviation of human nature. It essentially made us all sinners. But Christ's complete submission of his will paved the perfect way to redeem sinners. This leads us to our final section, the true essence of sin. Let's redefine rebellion. You see, at its very root, sin isn't just about pride or unbelief. It fundamentally requires 2 twin features. Step 1, the assertion of personal rights. And step 2, the rejection or overthrow of the command giver. It's the ultimate, calculated defiance of a stated boundary set by the Creator. Think of it like this. Imagine some students breaking into a locked basketball facility. Even if they play a super clean, respectful game of hoops once they're inside, the primary rule of breaking in has already been shattered, right? So every subsequent action they take in that gym remains on the wrong side of the rules. It's exactly like Adam breaking into the forbidden fruit. It makes every subsequent human thought or feeling a continuing violation of a broken covenant. To really grasp this, imagine facing the person you love the absolute most, holding a loaded pistol. Someone tells you to shoot. Now, you have absolutely zero desire to pull the trigger. The very thought is totally repulsive. Yet, you do possess the terrifying freedom to choose contradiction. You could do it. Jesus held that exact freedom and never pulled the trigger. Adam had that exact same freedom. And, tragically, he did. As we wrap up this explainer, the theological reality of Adam's rebellion kind of forces us to look in the mirror. It pushes us to ask a really tough question. When facing your own moral barriers, what is your point of no return? Thanks so much for joining me to explore the profound weight of our choices and the ultimate triumph of redemption.